Welcome to Oldsmob 455. We're going to work on the old Jav again. And we got the transmission out. You don't need to see that anymore. And you'll see this is a 10-inch converter. And after the engine started running better and driving it, it's a trial and error thing. It's got too much slippage in the torque converter. They cut them open. They bend the blades and make the stall speed, he wants like about 2,800 stall speed right now. He flashes it up, it might go all the way up to 4,000 RPM. And then regular driving, it isn't the type of torque converter he wants for driving on the street. Now, we got a bunch of parts laying around for doing the rear brakes. And he wanted to get new axles made that are a one-piece axle instead of, on AMCs, they have a two-piece, the flange on the end with the studs gets pushed on, and then there's a bolt, a nut, and he's going to get one-piece axles, and then we got a bunch of brake parts we can get off the floor and put this thing together just to take up less space in the shop. When we ended up having a torque converter designed for an AMC engine and mating to a GM Turbo 400, this snout has to be made the right length for engagement into the pump, and then this has to rest in the back of the crankshaft. And if you have it going too much, you can see by the wear, it's going in about 1/4 of an inch to rest. And then these bolts go onto a flex plate, and you got a more sturdy flex plate than the stock AMC, real wimpy sheet metal thing. Well, if you have too much, and you're bolting this thing up, it would be pressing the crankshaft, and that wouldn't be good. Or if it was buried into the pump, that wouldn't be good. And you can tell after we've had it apart that the bolts on the back of the crankshaft were getting rubbed. So when you're looking at this axle, it comes out of, the splines on one end, comes through, and then there's splines on the end that this hub gets pushed on, and they have a nut that holds it on here, and you got a cotter pin. I don't know, I never worked on an AMC rear end before. If we have to take this off to get all the backing plates off, yeah, most likely we'd have to, because the hole in the back that bolts up the backing plate is smaller than this flange, so definitely this has to come off. I don't know if we can just take the axle out or if it's retained by C-clips, or, when you unbolt those 4 bolts for the backing plate, does it just come off? There's different styles. We never worked on this, and we'll find out after we work on this, and we'll let you know.
The goal here is to get rid of this 2-piece type axle and get a 1-piece made for strength for the strip.
You'll also see that it isn't the strongest rear end. When you look at a Dana, they were a truck rear end, and the tubing was like 1/4 inch thick. This is like, 2 1/4 maybe, or 2 1/2, I'm not sure. But they didn't have that much power back in the time, so now when you're ending up putting more power into a rear end, you're probably asking, why is he sticking all his money into these axles and stuff? But he wants to keep it all AMC, and we're going to make it as strong as we can.
If you look at the pumpkin, it's a big pumpkin. If I'm not mistaken, it's an 8 7/8 inch ring gear.
All right.
But the weak point here are these tubes and the axles themselves. We talked about putting 4 9-inch bearings and axles into it, but we're just going to try running what we got first, see what happens.
And I think it's safe to assume, if you can't see any C-clips in there, that once we remove these backing plates, the axle should pull out.
So we're thinking we're going to take the brakes off here, and then you take them 4 bolts out. Now we'll release that plate, and then this axle will come out probably with the seal and the bearing. I'm thinking it's like a C-clip eliminator type rear end from the factory, which is nice because then if you break your axle in the tube, you don't lose your tire.
Right. You come crushing up on the body.
So this e-brake balance bar appears to be in the way of this plate to get this plate to come out. So I'm just going to take the brakes off. And we're getting all new brakes put on here anyway.
Do you have a fancy tool or do you just use a pliers?
Right here.
Okay, cool.
Using one of these jobs.
This is where you should have safety glasses on.
One of these jobbers is always nice.
A lot of times they'd have a hole in this flange that you could put a socket through and then you'd spin them off, but we're gonna have to use a wrench. Oh, brake line is being pulled.
So we should have had our brake line disconnected. It broke. And we'll have to disconnect our e-brake line. We're backing off our e-brake bolt here. So we got slack to try to get those e-brake jobs out of the backing plates.
So you still got to get this goofy setup that's up, it goes in easy and these prongs spring out. You can see that one right there. Okay, you can see the bearing is pressed on there. And then, this piece is 2 parts. And then Mosier makes one that's just a 1-piece axle like everybody else has. This is the failure point right in here. Where this, you can't see it, but where the splines are, it's a weak, stress riser. And guys get traction and they do a burnout and it breaks that off. Especially with Jeeps, when they're climbing rocks and stuff and the wheel goes freewheeling and then bites into another, rock and it's trying to jerk the car up forward and something's got to give. It's a beefy enough axle, but here's another situation. You don't want shoulders, sharp corners. And every time you have an axle, this should taper. Usually they're thinner in the middle. Anytime you have sharp corners like this is where they snap. A lot of guys will get axles re-splined, and where they stop putting the spline, if it doesn't step down, it's a stress riser and they snap right there.
This was a Wisconsin car and these brake lines are a little crusty.
You got that spring on there.
So we're just going to use a mini bolt cutter and replace them both.
So these emergency brake cables, when you push them in, they got prongs. You'll see it as I pull it out. And you're sitting there trying to rotate this thing and get all these prongs in so that it'll fit going back through that hole. And you're using a pliers trying to squeeze them in and it wouldn't work. And I says, let's try a tie wrap. And I pulled the tie wrap as tight as I could and it held the prongs in while I was pulling and then she popped through. I mean, it's frustrating. You're trying to get all these little prongs and you see there's one there that still wants to hang out. And if we're going to reuse this, which I don't think he's going to, you'd have to take a screwdriver and kind of pry all these prongs out, give them more tension. So when you pushed it back through, then the prongs would be holding it out. That's sweet. Popped out easy. So you still got the same thing going on. This is the place where the bearing sits in here. Here's a seal that needs to be replaced. One axle is usually longer than the other. That's why you can get by sometimes if you shorten the axle up. You can find a stock axle that's shorter and make it narrower, get more tires.
We've marked the ring gear teeth and we're going to count the number of ring gear teeth, and we've also marked the pinion gear teeth. We're going to count the number of pinion gear teeth and divide the ring gear teeth by the number of pinion gear teeth to calculate the gear ratio.
So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We've counted 43 ring gear teeth and 15 pinion gear teeth. Gives us a 2.87 to 1 gear ratio. I'll probably get a different set of rims with slicks for the back. We might go with a bigger tire, I don't know.
All right, him and I have a bet going that I told him we were gonna need a screwdriver to go like this, and he's really proud of his impact gun. And I says, no way. He's just gonna hang onto the axle and take this big nut off the end. So we're gonna go for it. That is pretty impressive. I've never had an impact gun that would have done that. That's been on there probably since 1968. I did have lubricant on it for a while. That probably helped.
That must be it.
It was a what do you call it? It's a PB Blaster.
All my attempts at pressing failed. I just ended up cutting the outer portion of the bearing off and then the outer oil seal off and got all the stuff off them like that. So I'm going to ship them out just like this. They make one-piece axles for Jeeps with the AMC 20 rear end. So hopefully they can come up with something for this.